Now, us small-wristed folk don't tend to get many chronographs. We don't get too many dive watches either, but chronographs are very hard to come by. But Dan Henry, a watch brand I haven't talked about for years, may have come in clutch here. I saw this online and had to buy it, so I'm pretty excited to show you what I've got. Now, Dan Henry is one of these vintage-inspired brands, hence why some of the watches are quite small. But what is in here? Is this... this might be an extra bracelet I ordered. We'll take a look at that in a minute, but let's get to the real meat in this pie. Here we have the unusual Art Deco Dan Henry packaging. It's this tubular container, and last time it had, yes, a watch roll inside. So, plasticky outer, but quite practical inner. And here we go. This is a brand new version of their 1964 Gran Turismo chronograph. And from what Dan Henry himself has told me on Instagram, this should be one of the smallest watches on the market, potentially the smallest, like, Mecha Quartz retro styled chronograph on the market at just 36 millimeters. So apparently even I should fit into this one, but we will test that in a moment. Now, this watch comes in a bunch of different colors, including this fairly special looking one. And if I get a bit closer, you'll see this is actually a mother of pearl dial. Now, this watch does come in a bunch of other colors, including the stereotypical, black and white panda style dials, as well as like a clean, plain silver one. But this really isn't one that I've seen a great deal before, like a full mother of pearl dial. Usually mother of pearl isn't really my thing, but I don't know, I thought it would look pretty cool in a video, and we could see how it really stacked up. And overall, it does look pretty cool. Now, it's not the thinnest watch out there, considering it's Mecha Quartz, partly because it's got a domed crystal, but even except for that, it certainly isn't the thinnest. And it's also not the best spec'd for the money. I'll whiz you through those real quick. We've got a 316L stainless steel case, of course. It's got 5 ATM water resistance, but it is just a snapback rear. It does at least have a sapphire crystal this time, and it's like a full-on bubble effect type of dome you can see there, which apparently do cost significantly more to make. Within it is a Seiko VK63, that's like a typical Mecha Quartz we see all the time, and by default it comes on this leather strap. Now, the previous Dan Henry straps I had were pretty good, and while they were firm out of the box, they actually lasted really well. This one, I'm not so sure. The backing just looks and feels a little bit cheap, but visually it looks good from the outside. I just feel like I get a bit of that plasticky squeak to start out with, which isn't super confidence inspiring. Also not completely convinced by the combination, actually, which makes me even more glad that I bought the extra bracelet, which we'll test in a moment. But overall, I am excited to get this on. It didn't cost the earth this. It's currently selling for $250 US, so that's about 200 great British pounds, although I did have to pay some import fees, sadly, on this one. But if you're outside of the UK, you probably won't have to spend that much. It's one of the curses of living here. And while that is considerably more than a lot of these AliExpress watches, I do think this watch looks pretty good, pretty distinctive, and actually the case finishing is maybe a tad better than I remember on the previous Dan Henry watches. I like the facets all on the lugs here. I think they look pretty good. Not the best from side on, but I guess we'll see when it's on the wrist. Now, Dan Henry may have said that this is like the smallest new model chronograph on the market, at least in the affordable space. But there is one other that comes to mind, and that's the Baltic chronographs. They do a few that are like 36.4 or something, which is got to be pretty similar. Although they aren't Mecha Quartz, those ones are hand wound, so it really depends what you like. They're also considerably more expensive than this. Let's give this a quick test. Love the feeling of these Mecha Quartz chronographs. Should get this really nice fast reset. That's beautiful. I'll just give you a quick look at that from square on. I do think it's a very good looking watch. I mean, it is a little bit on the vanilla side, but with this mother of pearl, I think that does make it a little bit more unique. I've just had a look at this off camera up close, and I've got to say, it really looks good up close. It certainly looks a lot more expensive, and it's got some pretty good detailing too. I've got a party coming up at the weekend. I'm going to rock this. I'm going to throw this on and I'm going to ask some of my mates who aren't super into the watches or anything and see how much they reckon this costs. And I'll put their guesses in the comments, I guess. Hopefully I'm not embarrassed, but I've got a suspicion they're going to think this costs a fair whack more. And it certainly looks small. Definitely more of a unisex size. What have we got here? Almost exactly, yeah, 36 millimeters wide. Compact lug to lug there, 43 as well. And thickness is a bit chunky, 13.5 with that crystal. And without it, not super thick or super thin, maybe just under 10. And wow, I've just whacked this on off camera. And this is the first time I can genuinely say this chronograph really fits me. You guys with larger wrists, you've been having all the fun. I can finally join you to some degree with this. I think it does look actually really good on wrist. Not 100% sure what to think yet of the mother of pearl. I think that's something I'll have to judge over time. Or if I really end up liking the shape and size of this watch, maybe I just buy it in a different colour, like a more standard and versatile colour. But I do want something that's pretty distinctive, that doesn't, just look like a copy of something else. Yeah, this watch definitely looks more expensive. The watch is also available in 38 millimeters as well, so if you wanted something larger, 38 is there for you, although this particular color variant doesn't come in that. This one at the moment is, I'm guessing, like a special launch edition for this new 36 line. And you can also get either the tri-compacts, which is the 3 subdials version like this, or you can get a bi-compacts, which just has 2 subdials instead. Now I prefer the triple layout, hence why I went for this one. But the other ones look decent too. And two things actually really not much of an issue now that I've got it on the wrist. The thickness, while you may struggle with it under some sleeves, it's certainly not bulky or anything like that. Or it doesn't feel that way at least. And the strap also feels considerably better. It feels comfortable enough, I would say. So if that's where they're cutting some costs, so be it really. And also it looks better than I thought on the wrist, which is half the job at the strap as well. But let's see what this bracelet's like. I've never tried a Dan Henry bracelet before. And if you didn't know, the Dan Henry brand was founded by a gent of the same name, an acclaimed watch collector, or at least like a vintage watch collector. I'm going to be honest, I'm not really into vintage watches. And I'd never heard of the bloke before I first reviewed one of their watches. So yeah, unlike some of these other brands, this is actually a real person. And he certainly has a good eye for stuff. And while this bracelet did cost me a chunk, maybe $60 was it? It does feel fairly decent straight out of the bag. And it's got solid end links, I've noticed as well. So while it might not be the best value, it might suit the look pretty well. Yeah, the clasp isn't the best. It's not like where you get on San Martins or anything like that. Yeah, I've got very small holes by default, so the absence of a significant number of micro adjusts isn't really a problem. I'll leave a link to this watch in the video description, by the way, if you want to go and grab one for yourself or to try it out, as well as this bracelet for it. We'll give that a try now. The straps are quick release at least, so it should be a fast job. And there we go. I have to say, I do think the bracelet suits the watch pretty well, this Beads of Rice style bracelet. The integration, or at least the length of the end link, is near perfect there with the lugs, which is great. Now, it's not fully sized up yet, but I do think that could also be viable, and that might be the way I choose to rock it. I always find that the bracelets are just more versatile in most scenarios than straps. Let me know what you think in the comment section. Now, there are a couple of things I will test with this watch first. We'll test the crystal and then the lume, because it does look like it's got some lume there on the hands. Not sure how performant it'll be, but I guess we'll find out. Now, I might be wrong, but I don't remember previous Dan Henry watches using sapphire. I think it was domed K1 mineral, I think. So sapphire should give you more scratch resistance than those, but let's double check. It's not a typo. This is the Ver D3 Pacific, and yeah, that's sapphire with a nice strong reading. And we're looking for a similar reading on this Dan Henry. Oh dear, oh dear. Let's go back and check again. And that's a strong reading. I could have sworn it says sapphire. And yeah, it does feel warm to the touch, not cold to the touch. But let's just check the listing. Ah, no, I misread the listing. Now, the word sapphire is in there, and I'm not sure you can see this because of the polarizing filter. Oh, here we go. It's actually sapphire-coated mineral crystal. I just read the top line and idiotically moved on. So no, we haven't been missold here. Now, surprisingly, this sapphire-coated mineral glass is fairly decent. Now, obviously, it's not as good as sapphire, which is a shame, but it is quite considerably better than standard mineral crystal. In my big scratch resistance test that we did, it was one of the very top placing crystals, and it beat a bunch of other like specialized third-party crystals. So while it's not great and not as good as I'd first hoped, it's still pretty decent actually, and not you know, disastrous for the money or anything. But, you know, the loom might be disastrous. Let's test the loom. It looks like we've also got some very sneaky little loom pips around the edge there too, which I didn't see. I thought it was going to be one of them watches where just the hands are illuminated. It's got some type of super lumen over on there, like a blue-green hue from the looks of it. And while those areas are all quite small in size, they seem to be hanging on fairly well, actually. That's actually better than quite a few of the big brands. So overall, is this the new best chronograph for small wrists? Well, it's certainly a pretty decent chronograph for small wrists, especially if you've got really small wrists like me. This sort of thing is incredibly hard to come by. A lot of the time at this sort of sizes, you have really childlike designs, but I think this looks pretty elegant, and I think I'll be keeping this probably. I think I'll be giving this a really good test run the next few weeks. It's Future Ben here, and I've just noticed something. Now, I've been really enjoying this watch over the last 24 hours or so, but I couldn't help but see that on the back of the watch, there might be a little error, or at least a confusing inclusion. That being this. Can you see here? Now, this model is the Gran Turismo, but the engraving on the case back says Grand Turismo, which to my knowledge just isn't really a thing. I'm assuming this is some sort of error. Thankfully, it's on the case back, not on the dial, so you aren't going to be seeing it. I mean, I guess there's the off chance that because this is like a fancy version of the watch, they're kind of nicknaming this the grand version or something. But I highly doubt it. I do think this potentially is an error here, even though it is actually spelt Grand Turismo like this in all the product shots as well. So if it is a deliberate choice, it's a bit of an unusual one. Perhaps this will be a model that the collectors really like. They often like these rare mistake watches. Maybe this is one of them. I mean, it doesn't particularly dampen my feelings on the watch. I still think this is really decent. I'll link it below, but just thought I'd definitely mention it because if you bought it yourself, you'd probably notice it as well after some time.